I first want to say thank you to everyone who has been praying for my father. If you hadn't heard the news, he had a stroke on Friday. But the great thing is he's back home and has recovered. And Terry, I want to let you know this was an absolute miracle.
Yeah, it wasn't. Even the doctor.
Yeah, the doctor said this is a TPA miracle, and we'll tell you what that means. What is TPA?
But part of the reason that I think, God orchestrated this in such a way that everything that happened once signs started to present went the best possible way they could have gone.
Even before signs started to present, my wife was at home, and she normally goes to see my mother, and she was thinking about doing it that day and said, well, no, I'll put that off. I'll do that on Sunday after church. I'll go see her, and we'll have lunch together. But the Holy Spirit nudged her and said, no, go today. Yeah. And then she put it off again. And he nudged again and said, no, go right now. So as she's getting into her car, my son, who rarely does this, but he picked up the phone, imagine that, and called his mother and said, I want you to know that I'm at the train track by the house, and there's a big freight train. Don't go.
Not even knowing she was going to leave the house, right?
Didn't know that. And don't go this way. So she went another route, and she walks in, and within 2 minutes of walking into the house, sees Dad having the onset of symptoms where his speech wasn't right. Yeah. And he kept saying, I can't understand what's going on with me. This isn't, what is happening to me? And she had been educated because of my mother's stroke in what are the signs. And so she identified it immediately, and we got help right then.
And got him to a center where that's what they deal with.
Right.
Yeah.
And I urge everyone, know where your stroke centers are. Know the signs, number one, and we'll tell you what those are in just a minute. Know those signs, and then know where the stroke center is, and get there as soon as you can. Time is brain cells, and the faster you can go, the better.
And within the structure of what you're talking about, that TPA that you mentioned, that drug was administered within really a brief period of time, from the time of onset until he got to the center.
Within 80 minutes, he got the TPA. And you have to do it within 3 hours. And so he was within that 3-hour period. But it goes on. I mean, we got the immediate transport, which was just amazing. All of that fell into place. They get to the hospital. By the time Dad hits the hospital, his right side is now paralyzed, and he's not responsive anymore.
Wow. So
they put him through a CT scan to identify what type of stroke is it, because if it's bleeding on the brain, you can't administer the drug. You can actually kill somebody by doing that. So you've got to go through the tests. When they determined it was a clot, that test came back positive. Then suddenly I appear on the scene. I'd been called, and I raced, let's get to the hospital. I walk in exactly at the right time that they needed someone who had the authority to give permission to give TPA.
Another thing to pay attention to right there. Yeah. Have somebody have the authority to give permission.
You got to have the advance directive. You have to have the power of attorney. If I'm not competent, who can give permission for treatment? So I walked in right at the right. It was one of the strangest things, where it was one of these telemedicine facilities where the doctor wasn't in the room. He was on a screen. And it was, they have these advanced stroke specialists available to be on call for this kind of thing. And so he's not in the room. He's looking at the screens and making the diagnosis. And he asked for permission to give TPA, explains bleeding on the brain, what the negative, the obvious negative, gave permission. Absolutely amazing. With 10 minutes, here he is, paralyzed on the right side, unresponsive, lying there, and I'm going, wow. Within 10 minutes of getting the drug, he is awake, alert, able to raise his arms, raise his legs. I mean, talk about joy in that room.
I'm sure.
The ER staff said they'd never seen anything like that, that kind of rapid recovery. And then the doctor said, this is a TPA miracle. So,
wow, and we are rejoicing here.
and to add to it, yesterday, all this happens Friday. Yesterday, he's released from the hospital. He's now home and doing well, and has his speech back, has full movement, and we're expecting full recovery.
We have restricted him from riding the horse, can I just say?
And we're going to give some time off.
Yeah, amen.
Well, I know you want to find out more, so here's more on this clot-busting drug. It's called TPA. Lori Johnson tells us why it's so important to use it as soon as possible after a stroke.
Most strokes are caused by clots that block blood flow to the brain. When that happens, brain cells die, some 2 million each minute. To limit the damage, the drug TPA can quickly dissolve the clot to get blood flowing again. Dr. Bruce Lowe, Director of Emergency Medicine at Centera Norfolk General Hospital, calls TPA a game changer.
I've seen patients who have had significant neurological symptoms who have completely resolved with this drug.
With less damage comes faster recovery. Most TPA patients can go home, not to a rehabilitation facility. While TPA can restore people to normal, as many as 90% of stroke victims are unable to receive it because they arrive at the hospital too late. TPA must be given within 4 hours of the onset of stroke symptoms, and many people don't recognize the signs soon enough. They happen suddenly and often include numbness or weakness of the face, arm, leg, or especially on one side of the body. Confusion, also not speaking or understanding well. Trouble seeing. Difficulty walking, dizziness, or losing balance.
And you may not recognize that you're having a stroke. A lot of times people maybe are in denial because you're not having pain, or it doesn't feel urgent like a heart attack does. So a lot of times people wait and delay, and our ability to treat with interventions like TPA don't become an option anymore, unfortunately.
Patients should call 911 immediately upon experiencing any of these symptoms because emergency crews can start treatment on the way to the hospital.
Definitely, the sooner that we give the TPA, the better. So we know that if we give them the first 60 minutes of symptom onset, that people have the best outcomes.
Learning stroke symptoms and taking quick action should they appear matter greatly because beating a stroke often comes down to beating the clock. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Well, let me underline this. It's fifth largest killer. About 185,000 people die from a stroke in America every year. But here's the other bad news. It's the leading cause of long-term significant disability. So it's important to know the warning signs. Well, according to the National Stroke Association, they include sudden numbness or weakness in your face, arm, or leg, especially on one side of the body, sudden confusion, trouble speaking or understanding, sudden trouble seeing in one or both eyes, sudden trouble walking, dizziness or loss of balance, and then sudden severe headache for no reason. And let me underline, all of that is sudden. So if you have these onsets, don't dismiss them. You need to act quickly. And if it's happening to you, realize that your ability to communicate what's going on with you is going to be compromised. So dial 911 as soon as you can. You've got to get immediate medical help. Well, so what do? If you think someone is having a stroke, you act fast. That stands for you look at their face. Does one side of the face droop? Can the person smile? The arms, that's the A in fast. Can the person raise both arms equally? Then the S is for speech. Can the person repeat a simple phrase without slurred or strange speech? And then time, that's the T. Call 911 quickly. If you see any of these signs, you've got to act fast. But you can learn more about strokes and how to prevent them from the National Stroke Association, and you can find a link to their website in our stories on cbnnews.com.